Fáilte agus tá fáilte roimh anseo aniu, mis sé Sean McCarran agus tá go le Lord aniu le Liam Wray fa donnach na folla inis go with a chanu an that day in a gun couple of Hello, my name is Sean McCarran, chairman of Aontú Derry, and I'm here today to talk with Liam Wray here about his experiences and expectations for Bloody Sunday March the coming weekend. So, without further ado, the first question, Liam, is I'd like you to be able to maybe just talk briefly about your experiences on the day. It's something that people would probably be very interested in.
Well, the day started off like any other day. As a family, we went to Mass, which was a traditional thing we'd done in Derry. Up the long tour, back home, and had our dinner. We were a politicised family in the sense that we were very, very aware of the injustices that was happening in the town with gerrymandering, the franchise and the voting. So we were all determined to go out in the march, and particularly so because of what had happened 8 days previously at McGilligan Stand, where the people in peaceful march there were brutalised by the parachute regiment. So in a sense we were young, the younger members of the family. My parents were very solid in their support for civil rights and very, very supportive of the people who were interned without trial, because the word was coming out as well, those people were being abused and tortured. So we set out as a family unit on that day, my mother and my father, my older brother Jim, who was murdered that day, myself, my younger brother Alex, and my younger sister Geraldine. So there was no sense of fear. And as we were heading up from Drumcliff up to the Craigan, which is quite a climb, it's about, say about half a mile or so, and we could see more and more people coming in from the side streets. So there was a sense of elation. It was a sense of victory even before you got to the assembly point in Central Dive, because you just thought, when that amount of people are out, they're going to listen. This is going to be a good day for the Derry people. It's going to be a good day to show our opposition to internment. And when we arrived at Central Dive, the massive crowd there was over 20,000, and there was a bit of singing going on, and then we set off in the march. Well, you know, in Derry, it's not a military formation. It's not even like an Orange Order march. It's a congregation of people ambling along together, stopping, talking. But the buzz was one of gaiety and success. People were happy, and then you could hear the "We Shall Overcome," and the people were singing in. And I lost contact with my father and Jim and young Alex. I was with my mum and the younger sister, Geraldine, as the march descended down towards William Street. Now, when we arrived past the cathedral, we started to be aware then of a heavy military presence, heavier than any other marches we were on. And I wouldn't say we were alarmed, but I think the thought was in our mind, they're going to give us a rough time. They'll probably try and arrest us because it was officially an illegal march. But that's the worst would have been in your mind. As a young man, it wouldn't have troubled me, and I wouldn't have been bothered about it. So when we got to the junction of William Street and Roswell Street, the march was to proceed to the Guildhall. The army and police had sealed off the bottom of the street to prevent the march going there. And what happened, and many a time in Derry, there was marches before and marches after, there was a small riot took place. But they fired a lot of gas, which was very severe. And I remember being behind the waste ground coming into Roswell Street to get a bit of shelter, and my mum being affected by the gas, and my young sister, and I said to them, more or less, you've go on home now. And I was hanging about at that stage. And then the word came through, look, we're going to assemble and have the rally at Free Derry Corner. So people then were basically making their way out of William Street and over in the West Ground. It was, quite a massive crowd. We're starting to then amble up towards Free Derry Corner. The riot was subsiding basically at that time. And I was halfway along the road in Roswell Street with Glenparra Park on my right, when I heard the shouts from behind me, they're coming in, and that went right through the crowd. And I remember looking behind me, and I heard the heavy whine and grind of armoured cars. That was nearly frightening, really heavy revving. And I seen them coming across from Sackville Street, across the junction at William Street, and straight down Roswell Street. I had done what the majority of people done. I ran, right? And I ran along, and within I would say 5 or 10 seconds, just at the corner of Glenfada Park. Now, I would say 15 feet above my head. When I heard this shooting, I seen the bricks, 2 parts of brick come off the wall, and then I was sure this was live rounds. And I got shelter in Glenfada Park, and kneeling down there at the wee corner at the tram walk to get a bit of air, because people forget then the gas was quite toxic, you know. And I was watching down Russell Street, and I could see people running. And at that stage, my thought was still, even though I seen the brick come out the wall, there was something in my mind, even though I was hearing shots and they were getting louder, and you knew the sharp crack of live ammunition, I was still thinking, this ain't happening, you know. So, in fear, I started to think I'd better get myself home. And I made an exit through the back part of Glenfada Park, and I could hear people. I got to the corner there to go across a new road towards Lasvana Park to make my way home to the home, and I could hear people saying, careful, careful, they're shooting at the walls. And there were people lying on the ground. No, I mean hundreds of people lying on the ground. But I just thought to myself, look, it hit them lying on the ground as it hit me, and I made a dart across the street and got back to the home. When I arrived at my home in Drumclop, it was quite packed with people, because there were people who had left earlier because they'd been hosed by a water cannon, which had a purple dye, and people were afraid that on the way home they'd be arrested because they had purple dye on them. So my mother was giving them assistance to clean out, you know, wash, rinse out their coats, whatever, when I arrived on. But when I arrived on, my father and Jim wasn't there. And I wasn't unduly alarmed. I knew there was something very bad. I hadn't seen anybody shot, but I'd heard the fear and the panic. And unless you're there and tested, it's unbelievable how that can affect you, you know. And you know there's something wrong, but you can't see what it is. But shortly after that, about 5 minutes after I arrived home, my father arrived on, and he said to me, I remember, said to me, I want you to stay in the house, don't you bring it out again for a while. He says, because I'm a bit concerned about Jim. I want you to keep an eye on your mum and see things are okay. And I said, well, why are you concerned, you know? He says, well, I was running up through the West Ground. He says, when that, the Land Rover one stopped, and the soldier fired 2 bullets, right? And I says, he ran on, he says, and I seen another 2 people being shot. But my last look was Jim was on the far side of the street of Russell Street, but the armoured vehicles had passed him and he was running along behind them. So my father obviously was very aware there were people dead, so obviously he was a bit concerned about Jim. My best recollection, although people have told me it might be a bit at fault, but that's to do with trauma at the time, was my dad coming back and saying to me, Jim's dead. And he went on, that always gets me. He went into the living room to tell my mother, and I just remember that awful, awful scream. It still would make my whole body tingle when I hear it. And I went upstairs in the bedroom to kneel down to pray, and it just broke down. So not much after that I remember, except my uncle, my mum's brother, arrived at the house, and me and the uncle were driven over by a friend of his, because we had no vehicle at the time, to the morgue. When we arrived at the morgue, it was dark. It must have been around about 5 to 6, 10 to 6. And outside was army vehicles of some place, and they were having a good old laugh themselves. It was great fun for them. Real gaiety, you know. We held ourselves together, we went to the door of the morgue, and the police stopped us, asked us what we're really abruptly, what are you doing over here? And I told them we were over to see one of our relatives was dead. The uncle dealt mostly with that, you know. And then he searched us. And the minute I went into the morgue, I remember it well, at the door I turned left, and there was a sort of what you call an entrance area with a wall on the right hand side, and was 3 of the bodies lying there, just lying on the floor. There were people in the background, I think from different associations, trying to find out who was dead and be helpful. I knew one of the fellas was dead, because he wasn't a personal friend, but he was somebody, an acquaintance with him, was John Young. And then, looking straight ahead, there was a double door in the hallway, in the hall, not a hallway, that seemed to be open, and I could see trolley beds and bodies on top, you know, lying on top of the trolley beds. But the first one I seen, directly across, was Jim. And that was my focus. So went over to where Jim was, and I'll never forget it. It was Jim, but he didn't look like Jim. His face was sunken in, his eyes were open, his mouth was open, and the only wound I could see in his body at that time was a deep gouge above his left eye, and I thought he must have been shot in the head. What would I know, But I remember touching him, and I don't think I'll ever touch anything as cold in my life. Just a minute that I touched him, I thought, couldn't take it in that this brother that I was loved with, that was out about, a boy that was full of joy and life and vitality, and I was gone, It was so I think I just said a prayer, and then we left and at home and confirmed that it was. The next 3 days of the wakes and the funerals was only very, very small, specific memories that I have,
Obviously a very traumatic time for you, Liam, and it's obviously still has an effect on you, even today. And as for us all, I suppose, that were there on the day. But the campaign goes on. If you don't mind, we just mention the campaign goes on. And how do you feel about the situation where it is at the moment? And the campaign for justice again. What is your position on right now?
Well, I see it for what it is. My father refused to take part in a Woodger inquiry in February of '72. He actually went up and see the tribunal and told Woodger he wasn't fit. Sadly, in hindsight, he was correct, because we've seen what the Woodger report said. It applauded the soldiers and the discipline and everybody else, and said if you might have fired rounds in a reckless situation. And the County Dam, my brother being one of them, as being gunmen or bombers, maybe not at the time, but that they had at some time handled a firearm or were close to people who did. So after that, I think what happened in the community was what little confidence the people had, because you have to remember at the time families were dodgy about taking part in this inquiry. It was the local clergy, and I can understand that. We're thinking, no, this crime is so horrific, and some of them witnessed it, that this is the best way, and then their best thinking was to take part in the inquiry. My father didn't, but the rest did. So after that, Wray, we seen what happened. There was not much going to happen within the campaign, because if there was ever a recruit sergeant for the IRA, or a lesson that the young people of Derry and further afield learnt, it was, what's the point of walking down these streets unarmed? Right, I'd rather be armed, and I don't condemn them for that. I understand that. It was the tragedy of Bloody Sunday, the horror of Bloody Sunday, and the murderous policy of the British and Stormont governments and their military elite that created that situation, and I hate them for that. I hate them for that. So the years passed by, and there was very few. A lot of the families wanted to forget about it. My dad was different. We were taught it every time. Keep it out there, keep it out there. They're not getting away with this. I remember one instance, when I came in, I had a red sun in the paper, and it was quite derogatory about Bloody Sunday, and I was angry. I was snapping. My dad says, no. Keep it out there. Anything about Bloody Sunday, it keeps it out there, good or bad press. Don't let them off it. He says, so don't get annoyed about that, get determined. So in about I think it was about 20 odd years later, my brother Alex, and were a few others, got involved in trying to start a campaign called the Bloody Sunday Initiative. And that ran for about a year, and they set, I would probably say, the template for what happened the following year. I was a founder member of the Bloody Sunday Justice Campaign. And what we did then was, I think it was about 3 or 4 families who were more probably politically aware and determined to try and change the scenario and the history, in the sense of seeing official history, which was totally wrong on Bloody Sunday. We got together and we encouraged all our families, and we eventually got all families to agree that we would work hard in this, and we had a power collectively, we had a better power than individually. So we set out very basic things at the start, sending letters off to politicians, councillors, MPs, both home and in England and in the Republic, going around the doors, knocking on doors, asking for people to sign petitions that we could send off to the Westminster, to 10 Downing Street, going on different pickets. So a lot of involvement in that. It took a lot of time and not anything. But you have to remember, what we campaigned for was not a new inquiry. We campaigned for, the third demand was clear. and unambiguous. It was for the prosecution of those responsible for the murders and the attempted murders in Bloody Sunday. But then, and I think it was as much as a part, in honesty, as the situation developed after or coming up to or after the Good Friday Agreement, basically, the Blair government called a new inquiry, which was fantastic in one sense, but having experienced the public inquiry of Woodsbury, which is under the same Act in 1821, Public Evidence Act, and knowing the faults and flaws in that and the difficulty you have of those people actually addressing the salient points and the important ones, I made it clear that I would to see the bones, on the flesh and the bones before I would give support to it. But the new inquiry was started. We got a lot of information from it. It was times frustrating, at times exciting when we were clawing in new bits of information with the new exposed the lies and the brutality of what happened. And so I attended the inquiry, watched everything, instructed our family had our own counsel. We fought to get our own counsel. We thought it right that everybody should have their own counsel because each victim was a victim. And we knew the game that is played where they try to corral you all together, and in some ways it frustrates what you're trying to do and they're limiting you. But we fought it, and at the end everybody knows the result, that when the report, the Bloody Sunday Inquiry report, was published in 2010, that it was a joyous day in a sense, and I wasn't certainly going to reign in the Derry joy that day, because we had one thing. When they had to say that it was unjustified and unjustifiable the deaths of our family and friends and the other victims, well, basically what they were saying, it was murder. But that's as far as gone, and I wasn't satisfied with that, because I'm looking at it and I'm saying, oh, right, we've been telling you that for 30 years. You're telling me now, after the inquiry it lasted 6 years, and 12 years later you only tell me what I already knew. And to say that the parachute regiment showed a lack of discipline and went over the top, and that Wolford disobeyed orders, what a nonsense. The best trained army, or the best trained regiment in the British Army, their crack troops, don't disobey orders. They don't go over the top. Wolford was a professional and competent officer. He didn't. So we had Ford there on the day, saying, go on my boys, go on the Paras, and they were saying that, well, he didn't have any involvement in the day. What a nonsense. We had what he said before about shooting ringleaders. You know, Ford's policy was quite clear. We knew that General Jackson had created the shot plot which damned our relatives. So we knew that Heath and other people were involved in it, but he didn't judge or didn't want to go there. He didn't want to criticise the REC for not investigating it. He didn't want to look at the Ballymurphy massacre, which had a relevance to the Bloody Sunday massacre. So again, it was one of these things, an inquiry that gives you a crumb off the table that might satisfy you for a moment, but will not sustain your hunger for justice. So since then, our family and some others, on that night, an interview was asked, where do we go from here? And it was getting from some unionists. Their input was, what you got, what more do you want? And I said, I'll tell you what I want. I want justice to be done. I want to be treated, and my brother be treated like any normal citizen would expect it to be treated. Not that the police service would investigate his murder and the prosecution service would do their job.
How do you feel that the campaign is going to go from now on?
Well, there's no such thing as a campaign now in that sense. There are some families, I think, that they're happy enough. There are other families that are not. They're saying that the end result has to be the prosecution, not just a Thomas who fired a gun on. You knew they were expected to do that and get away. We know this goes right through the top military echelons, through the British and Irish parliaments at that time. This was all set up. This was all organized. This wasn't an accident. So we will go on, not officially as a campaign, but every anniversary, that's why we have the march, to highlight it again. There's legal proceedings still going on. There's a judicial review in regards to Soldier F and other soldiers that some of the families are taking to see if they can get the PPS's decision not to prosecute overturned. And it has happened before. It's happened for the family of young Haggerty, who was shot during Motorman. They got the PPS's decision overturned. The difficulty is, I don't have a lot of trust in the PSNI or the PS, because their attitude from day one, when they were going to charge Soldier F, I felt it was a lack of intent. In some ways, they weren't really. It was again a box ticking exercise. We've seen so many times that, like, we were sitting in Derry courthouse at the hearings before the preliminary hearing for Soldier F in the magistrates' court, and we couldn't hear a word was being said. So after each court hearing, we went out to another room where the PPS came out to tell us what happened. That's how much the value that the system has on relatives and those seeking justice, that you don't even hear what's going on in the court. The PPS was happy to have the hearings in Belfast until we put in family submission saying, well, they should be in Derry. That's the proper place for them to be, the only logical place. So whatever way we can, I know our family, some of my family have said, well, prosecutions aren't that important. There's others will say no, it is important. But they let whoever wants to pursue it the way they feel best, and I think that's the proper way. I know till I get my last breath I'll be saying these people are responsible and they should be prosecuted, and if they aren't, it's not going to stop me trying. Because I think it's not, you can't bring back the dead of blood, you can't bring back my loving big lump of a brother. No matter what happens, he's never going to come back. That's done. It causes moments of pain and grief, but not every day of your life. It's these anniversaries you feel it more. But what's important is, unless their lives were valued and you see that the state, particularly in what they call this new dispensation, deal with it, this is going to happen again. Yeah. People say, oh, it could never happen again. Unless people who are responsible for what they do are brought to book, then the politicians today, the police service today, the PPS today will still think, well, if it happens down the road, what's the lesson? Sure, you get off with it. You know, so it's important. I think it's important. Now go out in this march, and I hope it's a big march, and it's not looking back so much in the past. I was hoping that there's going to be the same thing again. A lot of our people in country folk who are interested in social and justice issues, and I know that what shakes governments and what shakes and what forms their opinion is when they see you on the street. You know, if we had been sitting in our houses in January 30th, 1972, or in wee halls talking about internment would still be in today. It had to be out in the street. It had to let those people in power know, not in our name, and if we have our way, we will change it.
Okay, Liam, thank you very much for a very comprehensive contribution and very enlightening talk. We wish you the best on Sunday, and we hope also that the march is very successful and the campaign continues and reaches its
well, can I say something, a postscript to that, just okay. And this is for Aontú, the party you belong to now. Yeah. I'm delighted with your stance on pro-life, and particularly so, and I'll tell you a reason now, don't be falling out with me. A few years back, because it was a European election, and the only candidate I could vote for, I'm a Republican basically, the only candidate I could vote for was Jim Allister, because he was the only pro-life candidate standing. So I applaud you in that, and I will support you as best I can in the future, and I wish you luck yourselves going forward. Well,
Guru Milam, I thank you very, very much for those kind words, Liam, and thanks for offering up all your time, and we very, very much appreciate it.